There are moments when one problem becomes so large inside your mind that you can no longer see anything beyond it. You wake with it, carry it through the day, take it into your prayers, and lie down with it at night. The Awliya understood that the problem may not have become greater. Your heart may simply have forgotten who is greater. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. These words do not deny your pain. They restore its true size. In this journey, you will discover 7 deep transformations that begin when Allahu Akbar stops being something you only pronounce in prayer and becomes the truth your heart returns to during fear, loss, uncertainty, desire, and hardship. Stay until the final lesson, because the deepest meaning of Allahu Akbar is not that your problems disappear. It is that they stop becoming greater in your heart than Allah. Before we begin, subscribe to Whispers of the Awliya and write Allahu Akbar in the comments, not as an ordinary phrase, but as a declaration that whatever you are facing today is not greater than Allah. Allahu Akbar breaks the illusion that your problem is everything. Some problems do not become powerful because they are truly bigger than everything else. They become powerful because they occupy everything else. One fear enters your mind, and suddenly it is the first thing you think about in the morning and the last thing you carry into sleep. One financial problem appears, and now every conversation, every prayer, every plan, and every quiet moment seems connected to it. One person changes toward you, and suddenly your entire emotional world begins revolving around their distance. The Awliya understood this danger deeply. A problem can become so large inside the heart that it begins hiding Allah from your awareness. Not because Allah is absent, not because Allah has become small, but because your attention has become trapped. This is why Allahu Akbar is not a small dhikr, it is a correction of vision. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater. Greater than what? Greater than the thing that has become too large inside you. Greater than the debt you keep calculating. Greater than the rejection you keep replaying. Greater than the mistake you keep regretting. Greater than the person whose opinion has begun controlling your peace. The Awliya understood that when remembrance weakens, created things begin looking enormous. One closed door feels like the end of your future. One person leaving feels like the end of love. One failure feels like the end of your worth. One delay feels like Allah has forgotten you. But Allahu Akbar comes like a spiritual interruption. It stops the mind and says, "No, look again. The door is closed, but Allah is greater. The person left, but Allah is greater. The plan failed, but Allah is greater. The answer is delayed, but Allah is greater." This does not mean the pain is fake. It means the pain is not absolute. That is the difference. The Awliya never taught people to escape reality by repeating dhikr without understanding. They taught the heart to enter reality with a greater awareness of Allah. You may still need to solve the problem. You may still need to make a difficult decision. You may still need patience. You may still need help, but you no longer approach the problem as if it is the greatest power in existence. That alone changes the heart. Imagine standing before a mountain at night. You see nothing except the mountain. It feels enormous. Then morning comes. The mountain has not changed, but now you can see the sky. This is what Allahu Akbar does. The problem may still be there, but now you can see beyond it. The Awliya understood that panic often comes from narrow vision. The heart sees one event and forgets the entire reality surrounding it. You see the bank account. Allah sees every unseen path of provision. You see the rejection. Allah sees every door you have not yet reached. You see what was taken. Allah knows what was protected. You see today. Allah knows the entire road. This is why takbir gives the heart breathing room. It reminds you that your perspective is limited. Allah's knowledge is not. The nafs hates this because the nafs wants to control the full story. It wants answers now. It wants guarantees now. It wants certainty now. When it cannot get them, it creates fear. The Awliya trained the heart to answer uncertainty with greatness. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than what I do not know. This is one of the most powerful forms of inner surrender. Not I understand everything, but I do not understand everything, and Allah is still greater. The nafs says, if you cannot control this, you are unsafe. Takbir says, control was never in your hands. The nafs says, if this goes wrong, everything is finished. Takbir says, you do not know what Allah can open after this. The nafs says, this problem is everything. Takbir says, no, Allah is greater. The Awliya also knew that some problems become huge because we keep feeding them attention. You repeat the same fear. You imagine the same worst-case scenario. You replay the same conversation. You mentally argue with the same person. You create 10 futures that have not happened. And every repetition makes the problem bigger. This is where dhikr must interrupt the cycle. Not mechanically, consciously. When the mind says, what if I lose everything? Do not immediately follow the thought. Say, Allahu Akbar. When the mind says, what if they leave? Say, Allahu Akbar. When the mind says, what if nothing works? Say, Allahu Akbar. The point is not to silence your mind by force. The point is to remind your mind that it is not the highest authority. This is powerful because the nafs always speaks as though its fear is fact. It says, this will destroy you. But fear is not revelation. Anxiety is not prophecy. Your imagination is not destiny. Allah is greater than every story fear writes about tomorrow. The Awliya understood that this truth must become deeply rooted, because if you do not consciously make Allah greater in your awareness, the dunya will continuously compete for that space. Money will try to become greater. People will try to become greater. Fear will try to become greater. Desire will try to become greater. Reputation will try to become greater. The problem is not that these things exist. The problem is when they become so large that obedience, peace, and trust begin shrinking around them. That is why Allahu Akbar must enter daily life. Suppose someone humiliates you publicly. In that moment, your ego becomes enormous. It says, fix this now, answer them, protect your image. But takbir asks, what is greater right now, your image or Allah? That question can save you from saying something you regret. Suppose money becomes tight. Fear becomes enormous. It says, compromise, take any path, do whatever you need. Takbir asks, what is greater, this financial fear or Allah? That question can protect your principles. Suppose someone you love becomes distant, attachment becomes enormous. It says, beg them, lose your dignity, do anything so they stay. Takbir asks, what is greater, this person or Allah? That question can return the heart to balance. This is what the Awliya meant by living dhikr, not simply repeating a phrase in isolation, using remembrance exactly where the nafs becomes loud. This is why Allahu Akbar appears throughout salah. Again and again the believer moves and says, Allahu Akbar. You begin prayer with it, you move into ruku with it, you move into sujood with it. Why? Because every movement is a reminder. Allah is greater, greater than what you left outside, greater than the phone, greater than the work, greater than the argument, greater than the anxiety, greater than the entire dunya waiting for you. The Awliya understood that if you truly entered one takbir with awareness, it could expose how many things you have unconsciously made too large. You raise your hands and say, Allahu Akbar, but inside, your mind is still with money, still with people, still with tomorrow, still with yesterday. The tongue says Allah is greater. The attention says the problem is greater. This is why the real work is in the heart. The Awliya wanted the inner state to agree with the words. That is difficult, but that is transformation. Imagine entering salah while carrying a crushing problem. Before you begin, pause. Do not rush the first takbir. Bring the problem clearly into your awareness. Then say, Allahu Akbar, and understand what you are declaring. My problem is real, but Allah is greater. My fear is strong, but Allah is greater. My future is unknown to me, but it is known to Allah. My heart is tired, but Allah is greater than my exhaustion. This can completely change the quality of prayer, because now you are not simply entering salah, you are placing the problem beneath takbir. The Awliya also understood that sometimes Allah does not immediately remove the mountain because He is teaching the heart not to worship mountains. You keep asking, when will this problem end? But perhaps another question is being formed inside you. Will I still trust Allah while it remains? This is deeper. Anyone can feel peaceful after the answer arrives. The Awliya sought peace before the answer. Not because they knew the outcome, because they knew Allah. This is where takbir becomes powerful. Allahu Akbar does not mean this problem will definitely end tomorrow. It means whether it ends tomorrow or later, Allah is greater. It does not mean I will definitely receive exactly what I want. It means what I want is not greater than Allah's wisdom. It does not mean nothing painful will happen. It means no pain can become greater than Allah in my heart. This protects faith from becoming transactional. The nafs says, I will trust Allah if He fixes this. The Awliya learned to say, I trust Allah while I am still inside this. That is a different level of tawakkul. And sometimes this is the miracle before the miracle. The situation has not changed, but the heart has. Yesterday the same problem was crushing you. Today you can breathe, not because the problem disappeared, because its size changed in comparison to Allah. This is the first anatomy of takbir. It restores proportion. It teaches the heart that whatever becomes greater than Allah in your awareness will begin controlling you. So when fear grows, do not only ask, how can I remove this fear? Ask, what have I forgotten about Allah that allowed this fear to become so large? When a person controls your emotions, ask, what have I forgotten about Allah that allowed one servant to become this powerful inside my heart? When money controls your peace, ask, what have I forgotten about Ar-Razaq? When a closed door destroys hope, ask, what have I forgotten about Al-Fatah? This is how the Awliya turned problems into doors of Ma'rifah. The problem showed them which truth about Allah needed to become stronger. Fear reminded them of Al-Wakil. Need reminded them of Ar-Razaq. Confusion reminded them of Al-Hadi. Brokenness reminded them of Al-Jabbar. Closed doors reminded them of Al-Fatah. Then the problem no longer remained only a problem. It became a place of knowing Allah more deeply. That is powerful, because the dunya wants every hardship to make you stare at the hardship. The Awliya learned to let hardship redirect their gaze toward Allah. So today, identify the thing occupying the largest space in your mind. Do not deny it. Do not pretend it does not hurt. Bring it forward, then place it beneath. Allahu Akbar. If it is debt, Allah is greater. If it is rejection, Allah is greater. If it is illness, Allah is greater. If it is loneliness, Allah is greater. If it is a future you cannot understand, Allah is greater. Repeat it until you are no longer merely saying the words. Repeat it until the comparison begins changing, because the first victory is not always the disappearance of the problem. Sometimes the first victory is this. Yesterday, the problem was the largest thing in your heart. Today, Allah is greater. That is where freedom begins. Allahu Akbar makes fear smaller by teaching the heart tawakkul. Fear becomes exhausting when the mind keeps trying to control what belongs only to Allah. You imagine tomorrow, create 10 possible disasters, prepare for things that may never happen, and slowly one uncertain future becomes larger in your heart than the one who already knows every detail of it. The Awliya understood that Allahu Akbar does not tell you to deny danger or pretend nothing can go wrong. It teaches you to place every possibility beneath the knowledge, wisdom, and power of Allah. When the heart says, "What if I lose this?" answer with Allahu Akbar. When the mind says, "What if the door never opens?" answer with Allahu Akbar. When fear whispers, "What if tomorrow is worse?" remember that tomorrow has never existed outside the knowledge of Allah. You may not know what is coming, but you know who knows, and this is where Tawakkul begins. The Awliya understood that peace does not always come from receiving certainty about the outcome. Sometimes peace comes when the heart stops demanding certainty and starts trusting Allah. The nafs says, "Tell me exactly how this will end, then I will relax." Tawakkul says, "I do not know how this will end, but Allah is greater than everything I cannot see." This is why fear loses strength when takbir becomes real. The financial problem may still exist, but Ar-Razak is greater. The path may still be unclear, but Al-Hadi is greater. The door may remain closed, but Al-Fatah is greater. Your heart may still feel weak, but the weakness is not greater than Allah. The Awliya also knew that fear often becomes powerful because the servant mistakes imagination for destiny. A thought appears and immediately feels like a prediction. This will fail, they will leave, I will lose everything, nothing will work. But your fear is not revelation, and your imagination does not write tomorrow. Allahu Akbar reminds the heart that no frightening thought has authority over what Allah has written. This does not mean you stop planning. Take the means, work, ask for advice, protect yourself wisely, make dua. But after doing what is in your hands, stop trying to carry what belongs to Allah. Tawakkul is not laziness, it is refusing to make yourself responsible for controlling every outcome. Sometimes the greatest spiritual exhaustion comes from trying to hold the entire future in your hands. You want to protect everyone, prevent every loss, predict every problem, and guarantee every result. The heart was never created to carry that weight. The Awliya learned to work during the day and surrender at night, saying through their state, "I have done what I can. The rest belongs to Allah." This is the second transformation of Allahu Akbar. The future may remain unknown, but it stops looking godlike. Fear may still enter, but it no longer sits on the throne. The heart learns to say, "I do not need to know everything before I trust. Allah knows, and Allah is greater." So when fear rises again, do not argue with every thought. Return to one truth. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than what I fear, greater than what I cannot control, and greater than every tomorrow I have not yet seen. Allahu Akbar breaks the power of people's opinions. One of the most exhausting prisons is living inside other people's eyes. You begin measuring yourself by who praises you, who ignores you, who respects you, who misunderstands you, and who approves of the choices you make. The Awliya understood that when people's opinions become too large inside the heart, the servant can lose sincerity without even noticing it, because instead of asking, "Is Allah pleased with me?" the heart begins asking, "What will they think of me?" This is where Allahu Akbar becomes freedom. Allah is greater than their praise, greater than their criticism, greater than their rejection, and greater than every opinion people form from the small part of your life they are able to see. Human beings see moments, appearances, and fragments, but Allah knows the intention, the struggle, the hidden sacrifice, the tears nobody saw, and the battles you fought when no audience was present. The Awliya did not teach that you should ignore every criticism or become careless about how you treat people. Sometimes another person may show you a fault that your nafs is refusing to see, and humility requires listening. The problem begins when criticism becomes so powerful that it controls your identity, or praise becomes so sweet that you start performing good deeds for attention instead of Allah. The nafs loves applause because applause makes it feel important. It wants people to notice your patience, your worship, your generosity, your knowledge, and even your suffering. This is why hidden deeds were so precious to the Awliya. When nobody knows you gave, nobody knows you forgave, nobody knows you prayed, and nobody knows what temptation you abandoned. The heart has fewer places to hide its desire for recognition. Allahu Akbar teaches you to ask a harder question. If nobody ever praises me for this, is Allah still enough? If nobody understands why I chose obedience, is Allah's knowledge enough? If someone misunderstands me while I know I acted sincerely, can I remain peaceful without spending my entire life trying to repair their opinion of me? This is real freedom. You no longer need to explain every decision, win every argument, or prove your worth to every person who doubts you. You can accept correction when it is true, ignore noise when it is empty, and continue walking because the final measure of your heart does not belong to creation. The Awliya understood that praise and criticism are both tests. Praise can intoxicate the nafs until you begin believing the image people have created about you, while criticism can wound the ego until you become obsessed with defending yourself. Allahu Akbar protects the heart from both extremes by reminding you that neither the admirer nor the critic possesses the final judgment. Someone may praise you for a deed that was mixed with pride, and Allah knows. Someone may criticize you for something sincere, and Allah knows. Someone may forget your kindness completely, and Allah knows. Someone may never understand the pain behind your silence, and Allah knows. Once this truth settles deeply, people's opinions begin returning to their proper size. This is the third transformation of Allahu Akbar. You still respect people, love people, and listen to wise advice, but you stop handing them the throne of your heart. Their praise does not become your oxygen, and their rejection does not become your identity. When the nafs says, make them see your value, answer with Allahu Akbar. When it says, you cannot be at peace until they understand you, answer with Allahu Akbar. When it says, their criticism means you are nothing, remember that your worth was never created by their tongue. Allah is greater than every opinion. And when this truth becomes real, you discover a kind of peace that comes only when you stop living for the audience and begin living with Allah as your greatest concern. Allahu Akbar breaks the ego's need to win. There are moments when the real battle is no longer about truth, justice, or solving the problem. It becomes about the nafs refusing to lose. Someone speaks harshly, someone misunderstands you, someone refuses to admit they were wrong, and suddenly the ego begins demanding victory. It says, answer them, prove yourself, make them regret what they said. Do not let them think they defeated you. The Awliya understood that this is one of the most dangerous moments for the heart, because the tongue may still speak in the name of truth, while the nafs has quietly taken control. This is where Allahu Akbar becomes a weapon against pride. Allah is greater than my need to have the final word. Allah is greater than my desire to be seen as right. Allah is greater than my reputation, my anger, my wounded ego, and the satisfaction I would feel from making someone else feel small. The moment takbir enters the conflict, the question changes from how do I win to what response is most pleasing to Allah. The Awliya understood that sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is the strongest thing you can do because the nafs is screaming for a reaction and you refuse to obey it. Sometimes walking away is not defeat. It is victory over the part of yourself that wanted to stay only to protect pride. Sometimes apologizing first does not mean you were entirely wrong. It means you value peace more than the ego's demand to be crowned the winner. The nafs hates this because it wants every disagreement to end with recognition. It wants the other person to say, you were right. It wants the audience to know your side. It wants your sacrifice to be acknowledged and your pain to be understood. But Allahu Akbar teaches the heart that Allah already knows what happened, and the heart does not need every human being to confirm what Allah already sees. Now, this is one of the deepest freedoms of takbir. You stop wasting hours replaying arguments in your mind and imagining better replies. You stop carrying conversations that ended days ago. You stop allowing one person's words to occupy the place where remembrance should be. The Awliya understood that a heart obsessed with proving itself has very little room left for peace. They also knew that the ego can hide behind religion. You may say, "I am defending the truth," while secretly defending yourself. You may say, "I am correcting them," while enjoying their humiliation. You may say, "I only want justice," while the heart is actually hungry for revenge. This is why the Awliya examined intention even during conflict. They asked inwardly, "If nobody knew I was right, would I still need to continue this argument?" That question exposes the nafs. If the answer is yes because truth truly needs to be defended, then speak with wisdom. But if the answer is no, and only the ego needs another round, then Allahu Akbar may be calling you to stop. This dhikr also protects you from another hidden form of pride, believing that your spiritual progress makes you better than others. You begin praying more, making dhikr more consistently, learning more, or becoming more disciplined, and the nafs immediately tries to turn worship into superiority. It whispers, "Look at you, you are not like them anymore." Then say, "Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater than my worship. Allah is greater than my knowledge. Allah is greater than every good deed I have performed." The Awliya feared this kind of pride because it can hide inside beautiful behavior. A person may leave worldly arrogance and become religiously arrogant instead. They stop showing off money and start showing off piety. The clothing changes, but the nafs remains. This is why takbir must enter even your worship. When you pray, remember that Allah allowed you to pray. When you give, remember that Allah gave you what you were able to give. When you understand something sacred, remember that guidance is a gift. Nothing leaves room for pride when the servant sees every good thing as coming from Allah. The fourth transformation of Allahu Akbar is this: the ego slowly loses its need to be the biggest thing in every room. You can be corrected without collapsing. You can apologize without feeling destroyed. You can let someone else receive praise without feeling smaller. You can remain silent without feeling defeated. The nafs says, "Win." The heart says, "Allah is greater." The nafs says, "Make them respect you." The heart says, "Allah is greater." The nafs says, "Protect your image." The heart says, "Allah is greater." And when the heart truly learns this, it discovers something powerful. You do not lose dignity when the ego becomes smaller. You gain freedom. Allahu Akbar makes the dunya smaller without making you run away from it. The Awliya understood that the dunya becomes dangerous not simply when you possess too much of it, but when too much of it begins possessing you. A person can have very little and still be completely controlled by money, status, comfort, attention, and fear of loss, while another person can possess wealth, responsibilities, family, and influence, yet keep the heart free because none of these things are allowed to become greater than Allah. This is where Allahu Akbar becomes one of the strongest protections for the heart, because every time the dunya tries to become enormous, takbir restores its true size. The problem is not that you have goals. The problem is when your goals become so important that you are willing to lose yourself for them. The problem is not that you want financial stability. The problem begins when money becomes so large in your heart that fear of losing it makes you compromise what you know is right. The problem is not that you love someone deeply. The problem begins when that person becomes so large inside you that their presence decides whether you feel worthy, peaceful, or complete. The Awliya did not teach people to hate blessings. They taught them to stop turning blessings into masters. This is why Allahu Akbar is so powerful in the middle of ordinary life. You earn money and say inwardly, "Allah is greater than what I earn." You receive praise and remember, "Allah is greater than what people think of me." You enter a beautiful home and remember, "Allah is greater than what I own." You love someone and remind the heart, "Allah is greater than what I love." Nothing has to be rejected simply because it is temporary, but everything temporary must remain beneath the one who is eternal. The Awliya understood that the dunya enters the heart slowly. It rarely arrives saying, "Make me your greatest concern." It begins with small things. You check what other people have, then compare. You see someone living more comfortably and begin feeling deprived. You see another person receiving attention and begin questioning your own worth. You see wealth, beauty, influence, and success, and slowly the heart begins believing that more dunya means more value. This is how the scale becomes corrupted. Then Allahu Akbar corrects it. Allah is greater than comparison. Allah is greater than what someone else owns. Allah is greater than the life you think you should have had. The Awliya knew that comparison can make even a blessed person feel poor. You may have health, family, food, shelter, faith, and opportunities, yet 1 hour of comparing yourself to others can make everything disappear from your awareness. The nafs does not count what you have. It counts what you do not have. Takbir interrupts this deception by returning the heart to Allah instead of returning it to the scoreboard of dunya. The heart says, "They have more." Allahu Akbar. The heart says, "They are ahead." Allahu Akbar. The heart says, "Why did I not receive what they received?" Allahu Akbar. This does not mean ambition dies. It means envy begins losing power. You can still work harder. You can still improve. You can still seek lawful success. But your peace is no longer dependent upon being ahead of everyone else. That is freedom. The Awliya also understood that the dunya can become larger through comfort. The nafs loves ease. It wants everything convenient, predictable, soft, and immediately available. There is nothing wrong with comfort itself, but when comfort becomes greater than obedience, the servant begins bending worship around lifestyle rather than lifestyle around worship. The alarm calls for prayer, but sleep feels greater. A needy person appears, but money feels greater. Truth requires courage, but reputation feels greater. A difficult act of obedience appears, but comfort feels greater. This is where Allahu Akbar becomes practical. If Allah is truly greater, then comfort cannot always win. Sometimes you rise while tired. Sometimes you give while still wanting to keep. Sometimes you remain patient while the nafs wants ease. Sometimes you choose the harder path because it is cleaner before Allah. This is how takbir leaves the tongue and enters behavior. The Awliya understood that the strongest proof of what is greatest in your heart is not what you say during peaceful moments, but what you choose when two things compete. When comfort and obedience compete, what wins? When reputation and truth compete, what wins? When money and integrity compete, what wins? When desire and boundaries compete, what wins? The answer reveals what is actually greater inside you. This is why Allahu Akbar is not merely emotional comfort. It is a demand. If Allah is greater, then something else must become smaller. The ego must become smaller. The dunya must become smaller. Fear must become smaller. Greed must become smaller. The need for people's approval must become smaller. The Awliya knew that saying takbir without allowing anything else to shrink would leave the dhikr incomplete in the heart. There is another deep layer here. Sometimes the dunya becomes enormous, not because you love what you have, but because you are terrified of losing it. Fear of loss can turn even a permissible blessing into a chain. You may have money, but instead of enjoying it with gratitude, you live in fear that it will disappear. You may have a relationship, but instead of loving with balance, you constantly fear abandonment. You may have health, but every small symptom becomes a source of panic because you have made physical strength the center of security. The Awliya understood that attachment is often revealed by fear. Ask yourself, what am I most afraid of losing? That question often shows what has become too large. If the answer is money, perhaps your heart has connected money with safety. If the answer is a person, perhaps your heart has connected that person with worth. If the answer is status, perhaps your heart has connected status with identity. Then Allahu Akbar becomes the correction. Allah is greater than the thing I am afraid to lose. This does not mean losing it would not hurt. It means the loss would not mean Allah disappeared. That distinction is everything. The Awliya did not become detached by pretending the dunya was meaningless. They became detached by understanding that everything had a place and only Allah had the highest place. Family had a place, work had a place, wealth had a place, beauty had a place, rest had a place, but none of them were allowed into the throne room. This is why they could enjoy blessings without becoming drunk on them. When wealth came, they thanked Allah. When wealth decreased, they still remembered Allah. When people praised them, they did not build identity upon praise. When people forgot them, they did not believe they had become worthless. The dunya moved up and down. The center remained stable. That is the power of takbir. The Awliya also knew that success can become one of the most dangerous forms of dunya. Hardship usually makes the servant feel needy, but success can make the nafs feel self-sufficient. You achieve something, people notice, doors open, and suddenly the heart begins saying, I did this. This is where Allahu Akbar protects you from spiritual intoxication. Allah is greater than my success. The intelligence was given, the opportunity was given, the timing was given, the strength was given, the people who helped were given, even the ability to work was given. When the servant remembers this, achievement turns into gratitude instead of arrogance. The Awliya understood that blessings should increase humility, not ego. If success makes you look down upon people, something has gone wrong. If wealth makes you feel independent from Allah, something has gone wrong. If knowledge makes you arrogant, something has gone wrong. The blessing did not become the problem. The heart gave it the wrong size. This is why takbir must be spoken in success as much as in hardship. People often say Allahu Akbar when afraid. The Awliya remembered it when celebrated, because praise can become a problem just as quickly as pain. The nafs says, look how important you have become. Allahu Akbar. The nafs says, you are better than them. Allahu Akbar. The nafs says, you no longer need anyone. Allahu Akbar. Takbir returns greatness to Allah before the ego steals it. There is another hidden trap of dunya, the desire to be seen. Modern life makes this especially powerful because everything can be displayed. Your food, your clothes, your travels, your achievements, your worship, your charity, even your pain can become something presented before an audience. The Awliya valued secrecy because secrecy protected the heart from turning every blessing into performance. This does not mean sharing good things is always wrong. The question is what the heart is feeding on. Would you still do the good deed if nobody knew? Would you still buy it if nobody saw it? Would you still visit the place if no picture could be taken? Would you still perform the act of worship if nobody admired your discipline? These questions reveal whether the dunya has entered through attention. Then Allahu Akbar reminds you that Allah's knowledge is greater than the audience. If Allah saw it, it was not unseen. If Allah accepted it, you did not need applause. This creates enormous inner stability. The Awliya also understood that some people do not love dunya through possession. They love it through control. They need everything to happen according to their plan. The schedule must work. The people must behave correctly. The future must unfold predictably. When anything changes, the heart becomes angry. Control can become a hidden form of attachment. Then takbir says, Allah is greater than my plan. This is not easy. The nafs wants Allah to bless its plan. The purified heart learns to ask whether Allah may have another plan. You prepare, you work, you make wise decisions. But if the road changes, you do not immediately assume the story has been ruined. The Awliya understood that some of the greatest openings begin where personal plans end. A door closes and another appears. A relationship ends and a deeper dependence upon Allah begins. A career changes and hidden abilities emerge. A delay protects you from receiving something before you were ready. The heart that says Allahu Akbar leaves room for divine wisdom. It says, my plan matters to me, but Allah is greater than my plan. This is surrender without passivity. You still act, but you stop worshipping the outcome. The dunya also becomes smaller when you remember death correctly. The Awliya remembered death not because they hated life, but because death reveals the true size of life's distractions. Imagine the things occupying your mind today. The argument, the status, the comparison, the jealousy, the race for more. How many of those things will matter when the final moment comes? The house remains behind, the title remains behind, the bank account remains behind, the body itself remains behind. What appeared enormous becomes suddenly small. This is why remembering death corrects proportion. It asks, is this really worth my heart? The Awliya used this question to protect themselves from being swallowed by dunya. They did not stop building, serving, teaching, earning, or loving. They simply remembered that none of it was permanent. The dunya became a road, not a home. This is a powerful difference. When you believe the dunya is home, every loss feels like destruction. When you know it is a road, loss still hurts. But you understand that you were never promised permanence here. The nafs says, keep everything. Takbir says, Allah is greater than everything. The nafs says, make this world permanent. Takbir says, this world was never created to be permanent. This is how the heart becomes lighter. The Awliya also understood that contentment grows when the dunya becomes smaller. The heart that constantly wants more is rarely peaceful. It says, when I get this, then I will rest. It receives it and immediately wants something else. The target moves again. Takbir breaks this endless hunger. Allah is greater than the next thing I think I need. This does not mean you stop asking for improvement. It means improvement stops becoming the condition for gratitude. You can want more while still thanking Allah for what is already here. You can seek better without hating the present. You can build the future without rejecting today. This balance is beautiful. The Awliya knew that contentment does not mean having everything. It means not allowing what you do not have to blind you to what Allah already gave. The nafs counts absence. The grateful heart counts mercy. Takbir helps the heart see both dunya and blessing correctly. The dunya is not everything, but every lawful blessing inside it can become a sign pointing back to Allah. Food becomes gratitude. Family becomes gratitude. Health becomes gratitude. Work becomes gratitude. Rest becomes gratitude. The polished heart does not worship the gift. It remembers the giver. That is the difference. The fifth transformation of Allahu Akbar is not that you stop caring about dunya. It is that dunya stops becoming greater than Allah inside you. You can hold it without being held by it. You can enjoy it without worshipping it. You can lose part of it without believing you have lost everything. The Awliya understood that the safest heart is not the heart that owns nothing. It is the heart owned by nothing except Allah. So ask yourself today, what part of the dunya has become too large inside me? Is it money, comfort, a person, reputation, success, control, comparison? Whatever it is, do not necessarily throw it away. Put it back in its place. Say, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than my money. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than my reputation. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than the person I love. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than my plans. And when this meaning settles, something extraordinary happens. The dunya may remain in your hands, but it begins leaving the throne of your heart. That is not loss. That is liberation. Allahu Akbar changes the meaning of closed doors, delays, and loss. There are moments when the hardest part of a trial is not the pain itself, but the question that begins growing inside the heart. Why did Allah allow this? You made dua, waited patiently, tried every lawful path, and still the door remained closed. You asked for healing, but recovery took longer than expected. You asked for provision, but the pressure continued. You asked for a relationship to be repaired, yet distance increased. The Awliya understood that these moments can either deepen tawakkul or quietly fill the heart with suspicion, because when the servant cannot understand what Allah is doing, the nafs immediately begins creating its own explanation. The nafs says, maybe you have been forgotten. Maybe this door will never open. Maybe everyone else receives what they ask for, while you remain behind. This is where Allahu Akbar must enter more deeply than before. Allah is greater than your interpretation of this moment, greater than what you can currently see, and greater than the conclusion your pain has created. You see one closed door, but Allah knows every road behind it. You see one delay, but Allah knows what receiving something too early could do to your heart. You see only what was taken, but Allah knows what may have been prevented. The Quran gives the heart a short but powerful correction. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows, while you do not know. The Awliya did not hear this as a command to stop feeling pain. They heard it as a reminder not to make limited understanding greater than the knowledge of Allah. You are allowed to hurt. You are allowed to feel disappointed. You are allowed to cry over what you wanted, but do not allow the pain to convince you that you know the entire meaning of what happened. Sometimes the door you desperately wanted to open would have taken you somewhere your heart was not ready to survive. Sometimes the person you begged Allah to keep was slowly becoming greater in your heart than Allah. Sometimes the success you wanted would have fed a pride you had not yet learned to recognize. Sometimes the delay that feels like punishment is preparing you for something you could not have carried earlier. We cannot claim to know the hidden reason behind every event, but Allahu Akbar teaches us enough humility to admit that our sight is short while Allah's knowledge is complete. The Awliya understood that one of the greatest tests of faith is trusting Allah during the space between the dua and the answer. Before the answer comes, everything feels uncertain. The heart wants a sign, the nafs wants a guarantee. You want Allah to show you exactly how the story will end, so that you can finally relax. But sometimes the deeper invitation is not, wait until you know the outcome. It is, know Allah while you still do not know the outcome. This is where tawakkul becomes real. Anyone can say Alhamdulillah when the door opens exactly as expected, but when the door remains closed and the servant still says Allahu Akbar, something deeper is happening. You are declaring that Allah's greatness is not dependent upon receiving the answer you wanted. His wisdom does not become smaller because you cannot yet understand it, and His knowledge does not become incomplete because your plan failed. The nafs says, if this was good for me, surely Allah would have given it exactly when I asked. But the heart, trained by the Awliya, begins asking a different question. What if goodness does not always look like immediate receiving? Perhaps protection sometimes looks like rejection. Perhaps preparation sometimes looks like delay. Perhaps redirection sometimes feels like failure while you are still standing at the closed door. Think about your own past. There may be something you once desperately wanted that would no longer fit the person you have become. Perhaps you cried over someone whose absence later protected your peace. Perhaps you considered one failure the end of everything, only to discover another direction because of it. Perhaps a delay forced you to develop patience, knowledge, discipline, or dependence upon Allah that immediate success would never have taught you. This does not mean every hardship will eventually receive a simple explanation, but your own history can remind you that today's interpretation is not always tomorrow's understanding. This is why Allahu Akbar becomes especially important during unanswered questions. When you understand everything, trust is easier. When you understand nothing and still refuse to think badly of Allah, the heart is entering a deeper form of surrender. You say, my pain is real, but Allah is greater than my pain. My confusion is real, but Allah's knowledge is greater than my confusion. I wanted another road, but Allah sees what lies beyond every road. The Awliya also understood that sometimes the greatest pain is not a closed door, but the removal of something you already possessed. Losing what you never had is difficult, but losing what you touched, loved, enjoyed, and believed would remain can shake the heart much more deeply. A relationship ends, money disappears, health changes, a position is lost, someone you relied upon is no longer there, and suddenly the dunya teaches you one of its hardest lessons. Nothing created was promised to remain forever. This is where attachment becomes visible. While the blessing was present, you may have believed it was simply something you loved. When it leaves, the depth of dependence is revealed. The heart says, I cannot survive without this. Then Allahu Akbar arrives not to mock your grief, but to remind you that what left was never greater than the one who gave it. Allah is greater than what left. Allah is greater than what changed. Allah is greater than what cannot return. This does not mean you stop missing people or grieving losses. The Awliya did not seek hearts made of stone. They sought hearts capable of grief without spiritual collapse. You can cry and still trust. You can miss someone and still know that Allah remains. You can wish circumstances were different and still refuse to allow disappointment to become despair. This balance is extremely important because some people misunderstand tawakkul as pretending nothing hurts. They hide tears, suppress questions, and believe strong faith means feeling nothing. But the heart can hurt deeply while remaining attached to Allah. The real danger begins when the pain starts redefining Allah for you. This happened, therefore Allah does not care. I lost this, therefore Allah abandoned me. My dua has been delayed, therefore Allah is not listening. These conclusions are where the nafs turns pain into a veil. Allahu Akbar tears through that veil. It says, my experience is not greater than Allah. My understanding is not greater than Allah. My emotions do not possess the authority to define Allah. That sentence can save a heart during its darkest season. The Awliya understood another important truth. Sometimes Allah changes the servant before changing the circumstance. You may keep asking, when will this financial problem end? While the deeper transformation happening inside you is that money is losing its power over your heart. You keep asking, when will this person return? While your dependency on that person is slowly being broken. You keep asking, when will this door open? While patience, humility, and tawakkul are being built in ways you cannot yet measure. The situation may appear unchanged, but you are changing inside it. 6 months ago, the same uncertainty destroyed your sleep. Today, you still do not have every answer, but you can breathe, you can pray, you can function, you can say Allahu Akbar and mean it more deeply than you did before. Do not underestimate this transformation simply because it cannot be photographed or measured. The Awliya valued changes of the heart because they knew circumstances are temporary, while what the heart learns can remain. If Allah immediately removes every difficulty, you may receive relief without discovering what was hiding inside you. But hardship can expose fear, excessive attachment, entitlement, arrogance, dependency, and the illusion of control. Once exposed, these diseases can be brought into remembrance and purification. A closed door may expose how much your peace depended upon getting your own way. A delay may expose how impatient the nafs has become. A loss may expose how deeply you connected a created thing with safety. These discoveries hurt, but they can become openings if you do not run from them. Instead of asking only, how do I get this thing back? Ask, what is this loss revealing about my heart? That question is powerful because sometimes the object is not the deepest problem, the attachment is. You think you only need the person to return, but perhaps what you really need is to rediscover your worth beyond that person. You think you only need more money, but perhaps your heart also needs to remember Ar-Razak. You think you only need the plan to work, but perhaps you need to learn that control never belonged to you. Then takbir becomes personal. Allahu Akbar means Allah is greater than the relationship I made too large. Allah is greater than the money I confused with security. Allah is greater than the future I demanded to control. Allah is greater than the identity I built around one worldly position. The Awliya understood that when something is removed, the heart naturally creates an empty space. The danger is immediately filling that space with another attachment. One relationship ends, and the nafs desperately searches for another person. One source of recognition disappears, and you chase another audience. One financial door closes, and fear pushes you toward anything that promises security. The deeper path is to allow part of that emptiness to return you to Allah. Loss can become a doorway to remembrance if you allow it. The empty chair reminds you that creation is temporary. The silent phone reminds you that human attention was never permanent. The closed office door reminds you that provision has more than one channel. The plan that failed reminds you that your plan was never the entire decree. Pain can make dunya appear empty, but the Awliya used that emptiness to discover that Allah was never absent. This is why some of the deepest dhikr occurs when there is nothing left to distract the heart. During ease, you may say Allahu Akbar while still surrounded by everything you wanted. During loss, the words become different. Now you are saying, Allah is greater even when what I loved has been removed. This is no longer theory, it has entered the wound. The Awliya also understood that delay reveals whether you worship Allah or only the answer. This is a difficult truth. Sometimes a servant prays sincerely while secretly saying, I will remain close to Allah as long as this dua eventually gives me what I want. When the answer takes longer, worship begins weakening and resentment appears. The heart discovers that perhaps it had become attached not only to Allah, but to what it expected from Allah. Takbir purifies this relationship. Allahu Akbar means Allah is greater than the gift I am asking Him to give. I may desperately want the gift, but the giver is greater. I may desire the door, but Allah is greater than the door. I may long for healing, marriage, provision, reconciliation, or success, but none of these can become greater than my relationship with Allah. This is a profound shift. At first the servant says, O Allah, give me what I want so that my heart can become peaceful. Later the servant begins saying, O Allah, give me peace with you whether what I want comes immediately, later differently, or not in the form I imagined. The request remains, but the heart has changed. The Awliya did not stop making dua. They asked with hope, persistence, humility, and need, but beneath their requests lived surrender. They knew Allah was not a servant of their plans. Dua is worship, not a demand that Allah arrange the universe according to our preferred timeline. This protects the heart from disappointment becoming rebellion. Sometimes you ask for one exact answer because your imagination sees only one road. Allah may open something entirely different. If your heart worships the form of the answer, you may fail to recognize the mercy because it arrived wearing different clothing. You ask for one job and another path appeared. You ask for one person while Allah was protecting you for another chapter. You ask for one solution while the real solution required changing you first. This is why the Awliya tried to keep the heart open. My dua is specific, but my trust is larger than my imagination. That is beautiful tawakkul. You can ask intensely without pretending you know what Allah must do. There is also a hidden mercy in delay that many hearts only recognize later. Delay can reveal whether you will continue worshipping without immediate emotional reward. The nafs loves instant results. Pray today, answer tomorrow. Make dhikr tonight, wake peaceful. Give charity, receive relief. But spiritual life is not a transaction machine. Sometimes you obey for a long period while circumstances remain difficult. During these seasons, the heart is being asked, is Allah worthy of worship even before the relief arrives? The answer must eventually become yes. You pray because Allah is worthy. You make dhikr because Allah is worthy. You repent because Allah is worthy. Relief is beloved, but Allah is greater than relief. This is where the servant becomes more stable. Their worship no longer rises and falls entirely according to circumstances. Good week, close to Allah. Difficult week, distant from Allah. Answered dua, grateful. Delayed dua, bitter. Instead, the heart learns consistency because Allah remains worthy in every season. The Awliya understood that this steadiness is precious. The dunya changes constantly, so if your relationship with Allah depends completely upon dunya behaving the way you want, your spiritual life will always be unstable. Takbir gives you another center. Allah is greater than the season I am in. A season of abundance does not make him greater. A season of difficulty does not make him smaller. He is Allah in both. Another deep test comes when you watch other people receive what you are still waiting for. Perhaps you have made dua for years, then someone else receives the same blessing quickly. The nafs asks, why them and not me? Comparison enters the wound and makes waiting harder. The Awliya guarded themselves carefully here, because envy can poison trust. You see another person's answered dua, but you do not see their entire test. You see one visible blessing and compare it with one visible absence in your own life. Allah knows both stories completely. Takbir corrects comparison too. Allahu Akbar means Allah's wisdom is greater than my comparison. Their timing does not define mine. Their blessing does not mean I am forgotten. What Allah gave them came through His wisdom, and what He has written for me will come through His wisdom. You are not competing with another servant for an Allah whose treasures can be exhausted. Someone else receiving does not reduce what Allah can give you. This realization allows you to make sincere dua for people instead of treating their blessings like evidence against your own life. The Awliya also knew that some losses cannot be replaced in the same form. A loved one dies. A period of life ends permanently. Youth leaves. Certain opportunities truly pass. In these moments, simplistic statements can wound rather than comfort. Not every loss is followed by getting something better in the same worldly sense. Takbir does not require you to pretend otherwise. Instead, Allahu Akbar gives the heart something deeper. Even where dunya cannot restore what was lost, Allah remains greater than the loss. Your grief can coexist with faith. Your tears can coexist with remembrance. You can carry absence and still carry Allah. This is mature spirituality. It does not promise that every wound will disappear in this life. It teaches you that no wound has the right to become greater than Allah. The Awliya understood this because they were not strangers to suffering. Their closeness to Allah did not mean their lives contained no death, illness, betrayal, poverty, opposition, or disappointment. What changed was what hardship produced inside them. The same fire that hardens one heart can soften another, depending upon where the heart turns. One person loses something and moves away from Allah. Another loses something and says, I have nowhere else to go except Allah. The loss is painful in both. The direction is different. This is why Allahu Akbar is a direction. Every time life pushes the heart toward despair, Takbir turns it back toward Allah. The nafs says, look at what was taken. Takbir says, look toward Allah. The nafs says, look at what did not happen. Takbir says, Allah still knows. The nafs says, your story is ruined. Takbir says, you have not seen the final page. And sometimes the final page you imagine may never come in this dunya. The Awliya understood that the hereafter is part of the believer's understanding of justice, mercy, loss, and reward. Not everything must be completed here for Allah to be just. This world is not the entire story. Once the heart remembers that, some unanswered questions become easier to carry. Not solved, but carried. There is a difference. Faith does not always give you every explanation. Sometimes it gives you enough strength to continue without one. That is where Allahu Akbar becomes enormous within the heart. You are no longer saying, I trust only because I understand. You are saying, I trust Allah because His knowledge is greater than mine. This is the sixth transformation. Closed doors stop automatically, meaning rejection. Delays stops automatically, meaning abandonment. Loss stops automatically, meaning that everything good has ended. You begin leaving room for wisdom beyond your sight. So bring one unanswered matter before Allah today, the thing you still do not understand, the dua that has been waiting, the person who left, the opportunity that disappeared. Do not force yourself to pretend it does not matter. Say honestly, this still hurts. Then say, Allahu Akbar. My pain is not greater than Allah. Say, Allahu Akbar. My unanswered question is not greater than Allah's knowledge. Say, Allahu Akbar. My closed door is not greater than Al-Fattah. And then continue walking. Perhaps the door will open. Perhaps another door will appear. Perhaps the wisdom will become clear. Perhaps some answers will remain hidden for now. But the Awliya discovered a truth greater than receiving every explanation. You can walk through an unanswered life with a heart that still knows Allah is greater. And when that truth becomes stronger than the question, the closed door may still stand before you, but it no longer stands between you and Allah. Live Allahu Akbar until nothing becomes greater in your heart than Allah. The deepest meaning of Allahu Akbar is not discovered only in salah, not only in dhikr, and not only in moments when life becomes difficult. It is discovered when these words begin governing your choices, your fears, your attachments, your ambitions, your reactions, and the way you carry yourself through the dunya. The Awliya understood that saying Allahu Akbar is easy, but living as though Allah is truly greater than everything else is the lifelong work of the heart. The real question is not whether your tongue knows these words. The real question is what becomes greater when two things compete inside you. When comfort competes with prayer, what wins? When money competes with integrity, what wins? When ego competes with forgiveness, what wins? When desire competes with obedience, what wins? When people's approval competes with what you know is right, what wins? These moments reveal what is truly greatest in your heart. The Awliya understood that the heart can say Allahu Akbar while living as though something else is greater. A person may say Allah is greater, yet fear controls every decision. Another may say Allah is greater, yet money decides what they are willing to compromise. Another may say Allah is greater, yet one relationship controls their entire emotional life. Another may say Allah is greater, yet the need for praise becomes more important than sincerity. The contradiction is not solved by saying the words more loudly. It is solved by allowing the meaning to enter behavior. This is why takbir begins to transform ordinary moments. The alarm calls you toward prayer while the body wants more sleep, and the heart must decide whether comfort is greater or Allah is greater. A temptation appears in private where nobody would ever know, and the heart must decide whether desire is greater or Allah is greater. Someone wounds your ego, and the nafs demands revenge, but the heart must decide whether anger is greater or Allah is greater. This is living Allahu Akbar. The Awliya understood that the most powerful victories often happen where nobody can see them. A person may look calm from the outside, while inside they are fighting an enormous battle against pride, anger, lust, jealousy, or fear. Nobody applauds when they choose restraint. Nobody knows what they could have done and decided not to do, but Allah knows. And that hidden victory is precious because there was no audience to feed the nafs. This is why private obedience is such a strong measure of whether takbir has entered the heart. If you obey only when people can see you, perhaps the audience has become too great. If you remain sincere when nobody is watching, then something deeper is happening. The heart is beginning to say, Allah sees me, and that is enough. The Awliya also understood that Allahu Akbar must enter success, not only hardship. Most people remember Allah intensely when something is wrong, but when everything begins going right, the nafs becomes dangerous. The business grows, people praise you, doors open, your name becomes respected, and suddenly the heart begins believing that its own strength created everything. Then takbir must enter immediately. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than my achievement. Allah is greater than my intelligence. Allah is greater than my reputation. The ability was given, the opportunity was given, the timing was given, the strength was given, and even the people who helped were placed on the road by Allah. The Awliya feared spiritual intoxication through success because hardship usually reminds you that you are weak, while success can make you forget. The servant begins thinking, I did this, and the nafs starts building a throne from achievement. Takbir destroys that throne before it becomes permanent. This does not mean you refuse to acknowledge hard work. You should work, improve, plan, and appreciate what you accomplish. But the heart remains humble because it knows effort itself was a gift. The hands may work hard, but the heart does not become arrogant. This balance is one of the beauties of the Awliya's path. Strong effort, deep humility. You can build something great without believing you became great because of it. You can receive praise without drinking it like medicine. You can succeed without becoming dependent upon success. The Awliya also understood that living Allahu Akbar changes the meaning of failure. The nafs often treats failure as a complete judgment on your worth. One business fails and you call yourself a failure. One relationship ends and you believe you are unlovable. One mistake happens and you believe your entire future is ruined. Takbir corrects this. Allah is greater than one failure. Your mistake is not greater than Allah's ability to guide you. Your past is not greater than Allah's mercy. One closed chapter is not greater than what Allah can write next. The Awliya did not use this truth to avoid responsibility. If you made a mistake, admit it. If you hurt someone, repair what you can. If you failed because of poor choices, learn. But do not turn one event into an identity greater than Allah. This is important because the nafs can become attached even to shame. It keeps replaying the past until the past becomes the biggest thing in your awareness. You begin believing that what you did is greater than what Allah can do with you now. Then say, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than who I used to be. This gives the servant permission to repent and move forward without pretending the past never happened. You remember the lesson without worshipping the wound. The Awliya also understood that takbir changes how you respond to temptation. Temptation becomes powerful when the heart looks only at what it wants now and forgets what is greater. Desire says, this will make you feel good. The heart says, Allah is greater. The nafs says, nobody will know. The heart says, Allah knows. The temptation says, just once. The heart says, Allah is greater than this moment. This is why takbir is not passive. It actively rearranges value. The thing may still look attractive. The desire may still be strong. But Allah becomes more important. That is real spiritual discipline. The Awliya knew that desire itself does not always disappear. Sometimes obedience means choosing Allah while the desire remains. This is deeper than waiting for temptation to become easy. Anyone can leave something after they no longer want it. The greater victory is leaving it while part of you still wants it because Allah is greater. The same is true with anger. You may still feel the heat. The body may still want to react. But the heart remembers, Allah is greater than my anger. This does not mean remaining silent in every situation or accepting injustice. It means anger no longer chooses the method. You respond with principle rather than impulse. This is one of the strongest signs that takbir has moved from the tongue into character. The Awliya also understood that Allahu Akbar must enter love. Love is beautiful, but love can become dangerous when a created person becomes the largest thing in your emotional world. You begin fearing their absence more than fearing distance from Allah. You compromise boundaries to keep them. You lose dignity because the thought of losing them feels unbearable. Then takbir asks a painful question. Has this person become greater in your heart than Allah? The answer may hurt, but honesty can save the heart. The Awliya did not teach people to love less. They taught them to love correctly. You can love someone deeply while remembering that Allah is greater. You can value their presence without making them the source of your identity. You can grieve if they leave without believing life itself has ended. This is healthier love, because the person no longer carries the impossible responsibility of being your entire reason for peace. Allah remains the center. The Awliya also understood that takbir changes ambition. At first, many people measure success by how much they gain. More money, more recognition, more comfort, more influence. But once Allahu Akbar becomes real, the measurement becomes deeper. Did this success bring me closer to Allah or further away? Did this money increase gratitude or greed? Did this knowledge increase humility or pride? Did this relationship strengthen obedience or weaken it? Did this position make me serve more or demand more service from others? These questions expose whether the blessing has remained beneath Allah or begun competing with Him. This is why sometimes receiving what you want is a harder test than not receiving it. During hardship, you feel needy. During success, you may forget that you are needy. The Awliya knew both conditions required takbir. When little is in your hands, Allahu Akbar. When much is in your hands, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than what I lack and greater than what I possess. This keeps the heart stable while circumstances change. The Awliya also understood that one of the deepest forms of takbir is accepting that your plan is not the greatest plan. This can be extremely difficult because human beings become attached not only to people and possessions, but to expectations. You imagine how life should unfold. By a certain age, you should have this. By this year, the business should be there. This relationship should have worked. This door should have opened. When reality becomes different, the heart feels insulted. Why? Because the plan became too large. Takbir says, Allah is greater than my timeline. Allah is greater than my expectation. Allah is greater than the version of life I imagined. This does not mean you stop planning. It means you stop treating your plan as sacred. The Awliya learned to plan with effort and hold the result with open hands. My plan is real, but Allah is greater. This one sentence can save the heart from years of bitterness. Sometimes your greatest disappointment comes not because life became bad, but because life became different from the picture in your mind. You keep comparing reality to the imagined version and constantly feel deprived. Takbir breaks that comparison. Allah may be writing a life different from what you expected without writing a life without mercy. You simply do not yet see the whole shape of it. The Awliya understood another secret. When Allahu Akbar becomes deep, the heart begins needing less explanation. At first, you want to know every reason. Why did this happen? Why now? Why me? Later, the questions may still exist, but there is another truth beneath them. Allah knows. This does not kill curiosity. It kills the demand that Allah must explain Himself before you trust Him. That is surrender. The nafs says, once I understand, I will accept. The heart says, I accept that Allah's knowledge is greater even while I am still trying to understand. This is a high form of tawakkul. The Awliya also understood that a person cannot live Allahu Akbar deeply without becoming humbler toward other people. If Allah is truly greatest, there is less reason for you to become obsessed with being greater than someone else. Why must you always be smarter? Why must you always be richer? Why must you always be more spiritual? Why must you always win? The need for superiority becomes weaker because greatness already belongs where it should. The person who constantly needs to feel above others may still be trying to occupy a place the heart should reserve for Allah. Takbir brings you down into servanthood. That is not humiliation, it is relief. You no longer need to prove you are the greatest, because you were never created to be. You are a servant of the greatest. This identity is enough. The Awliya understood that humility becomes easier when this settles. You can say, I do not know. You can admit a mistake. You can learn from someone younger. You can receive advice from someone less experienced in other areas. You can watch another person succeed without feeling personally threatened. Why? Because their greatness does not reduce you, and your greatness was never the point. Allah is greater. The nafs loses competition. This creates peace. Another powerful transformation happens when takbir enters grief. There are losses in life that do not simply disappear because someone gives you advice. Some absences remain, some memories continue hurting. The Awliya did not teach that saying Allahu Akbar means you stop grieving. It means grief stops becoming your entire identity. You can carry sadness and still remember Allah. You can miss someone and still worship. You can cry and still hope. You can acknowledge that something was precious without believing it was greater than Allah. This is mature faith. The heart does not become stone, it becomes anchored. The waves may still rise, but the anchor remains. That is what takbir becomes. The Awliya understood that remembrance is most powerful when it enters the exact place where the heart is weak. If your weakness is fear, take takbir into fear. If your weakness is pride, take it into pride. If your weakness is attachment, take it into love. If your weakness is money, take it into provision. If your weakness is control, take it into uncertainty. Do not keep the dhikr in a safe corner of your spiritual life. Take it into the battlefield. This is where Allahu Akbar becomes alive. You may say it 1,000 times while sitting peacefully, but perhaps one sincere takbir at the moment of temptation can reveal more about your heart. The nafs says, do it. You say, Allahu Akbar, and walk away. That is living dhikr. The Awliya also knew that the deepest test comes when even spiritual feelings disappear. There may be days when saying Allahu Akbar feels powerful, tears come, the heart feels light. Then another day, the same dhikr feels dry. Do you stop? The Awliya understood that Allah is greater than the feeling of remembering Allah. This is subtle. Sometimes the seeker becomes attached to spiritual sweetness. They want the emotional experience more than the discipline of worship. When sweetness disappears, they believe something is wrong. But takbir says, Allah is greater than my feeling. I remember him because he is worthy, not only because remembrance makes me feel good. This is sincerity. The heart worships Allah, not the spiritual sensation. This protects the seeker from another hidden attachment. The Awliya knew that all states change. Some days feel close, some days feel dry. Some prayers feel beautiful, others require effort. But Allah remains greater than every changing state. This gives consistency. You continue, and continuation shapes the heart. The Awliya also understood that living Allahu Akbar changes the way you see death. Death is the final moment when everything you once made large becomes small. The house remains, the business remains, the money remains, the title remains, the clothes remain, the body itself is left behind. What happens to all the things that once consumed your mind? They suddenly reveal their real size, temporary. The Awliya remembered death because death restores proportion while you still have time to change. Ask yourself, if you knew you had only a short time left, how many things would immediately become smaller? That argument, that person's opinion, that jealousy, that competition, that possession, that resentment you have protected for years? This is why takbir and remembrance of death fit together so powerfully. Allahu Akbar teaches you before death what death will eventually teach everyone. Allah was always greater than everything you were afraid to lose. The Awliya wanted to learn that truth voluntarily. They did not want to wait until everything was removed to discover that nothing was permanent. So they practiced release now. They gave charity. They forgave. They accepted humility. They let go of excessive attachment. Every small surrender became preparation. The nafs says, keep everything. Takbir says, nothing is greater than Allah. This makes death less of a sudden contradiction to how you lived. If your whole life was built around dunya being greatest, death becomes the violent removal of your greatest attachment. But if your heart spent years learning that Allah is greater, then death reveals a truth you were already trying to live. This does not mean the Awliya were careless about life. They often valued life more deeply because they understood its temporary nature. When something is temporary, you use it wisely. Time becomes precious. Relationships become precious. Opportunities for repentance become precious. Prayer becomes precious. You stop assuming there will always be another day to repair what is broken. The Awliya knew that Allahu Akbar is not a sentence for the end of life only. It is a way to make today more truthful. When you know Allah is greater, you apologize sooner. You forgive more wisely. You waste less time proving yourself. You stop allowing petty things to consume years. This is practical spirituality, not escaping the dunya, seeing it clearly. There is another final transformation. As Allahu Akbar becomes deeper, the servant stops wanting Allah only because they want problems solved. At first, dhikr may begin with need. Allah, remove my fear. Allah, open my door. Allah, fix my situation. These are valid du'as, but later something grows beneath them. O Allah, even if the road takes time, do not let my heart become distant from you. This is a different desire. The servant still wants relief, but nearness becomes greater than relief. The servant still wants the blessing, but Allah becomes greater than the blessing. The Awliya treasured this shift. At first, you want Allah to make your life easier. Later, you want your life to make you closer to Allah. Sometimes ease will do that. Sometimes difficulty will. Now your question changes from, why is this happening to me? To, how can this bring me nearer to Allah? This does not romanticize pain. It gives pain a direction. Takbir becomes that direction. Allah is greater than my demand for an easy road. Allah is greater than my demand to understand everything. Allah is greater than what I receive and what I lose. This is the seventh transformation. Now all previous lessons become one. Your problem is no longer greater. Fear is no longer greater. People's opinions are no longer greater. The ego is no longer greater. The dunya is no longer greater. The closed door is no longer greater. And finally, even your own preferred version of life is no longer greater. Allah is greater, not simply greater as a sentence, greater in priority, greater in obedience, greater in love, greater in trust, greater in fear, greater in hope. That is the anatomy of Allahu Akbar. So ask yourself one final question. What still becomes greater than Allah inside me? Do not answer quickly. Maybe the answer is fear, maybe money, maybe a person, maybe your ego, maybe your own plan. Whatever appears, that is where your takbir must go next. When it rises, say, Allahu Akbar, not because the problem is fake, because Allah is greater, not because the dunya has no value, because Allah has the highest value, not because you feel nothing, because no feeling becomes your master. This is how the Awliya lived takbir. They allowed it to rearrange the heart, and eventually the servant reaches a beautiful state. The world can become loud without becoming greatest. The problem can become heavy without becoming greatest. The heart can become wounded without making the wound greatest. Everything returns to its proper size beneath one truth. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater. And when that truth finally becomes larger inside you than everything you are afraid of, you discover that the greatest miracle of takbir was never that it made every problem disappear. It made Allah greater in your heart than the problem. If one truth remains with you after this journey, let it be this: Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than your fear, greater than your loss, greater than your plans, greater than people's opinions, greater than the dunya, and greater than every problem that has become too large inside your heart. The Awliya understood that takbir does not always remove the mountain in front of you. Sometimes it first reminds you that the one who created every mountain is greater. So when fear rises, say Allahu Akbar. When the ego rises, say Allahu Akbar. When the dunya becomes too important, say Allahu Akbar. And when you cannot understand what comes next, let your heart remember that Allah knows what you cannot see. Before you leave, subscribe to Whispers of the Awliya and write Allahu Akbar in the comments as your declaration that nothing will be allowed to become greater in your heart than Allah. May Allah make takbir alive upon our tongues, rooted deeply in our hearts, and stronger than every fear, attachment and distraction. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater.